What is up, party people? Today we are going to look over animal form and function, specifically with the human body, because humans technically are animals and it's the easiest for us to remember. So this is going to be part 1, where we're looking at our body plans and the primary tissues. Go ahead and pause if you'd like to read our objectives for today. And we're going to go ahead and start off with body plans. So animal body plans follow the rules of form and function. So form will follow the function. So if you have a function of flight, then the wings are going to follow the form of that. So opposable thumbs, grasping, wings, flight. The endoskeleton, exoskeleton. So let's take a look at the endo and exoskeleton. So an endoskeleton is our internal support and protection. So think like the interior skeleton of humans. Our bone structure is on the inside. An exoskeleton is the external protection and support. So think of like an insect or a wasp in this case. The shell and the support is on the outside, it's on the exterior. And the primary difference between an endo and an exoskeleton, besides being the fact that one's on the outside, one's on the inside, is the fact that exoskeleton animals have to shed, they have to molt so that they're able to continue to grow and change. Whereas humans and other animals who have endoskeletons, our bones will grow with us. We don't have to shed, we don't have to molt our skin like exoskeleton animals would. Additionally, abdomens are internal sections of the exoskeletons that serve as attachment points for muscles. So if you take a look at our crab photo down at the bottom, that little blue part is actually the connective tissue that connects to the muscles and attachment points. So that's why when you break off a crab leg, you might have to pull a little bit extra hard to get that part to break off. More body plans. So our aquatic animals, they tend to be more streamlined. So we have what we call is a fusiform. So this is our tubular tapered shape of aquatic animals, and almost every single aquatic animal will follow this shape, and it's because it reduces drag in the water for swimming. Additionally, there's limits on size. So cell size limits to cellular processes. There's only so much surface area and volume ratio that a cell can have in order to function properly and be able to diffuse nutrients and waste. And if it exceeds that, then the cell can die off because it's not able to properly function. And larger animals don't have larger cells, they just have more cells. So if you think of an elephant, which is our largest land animal, or a blue whale, which is our largest aquatic animal, their cells are not larger, they just have more of them. Additionally, land animals are limited to how large they can grow because of the force of gravity. There are 3 primary body plans. You can have an asymmetrical body plan, meaning there's no pattern, there is no symmetry at all. You can have a radial symmetry body plan, meaning that everything stems out from a central point. So think of like a starfish or a sea anemone. Or you could be bilateral, and bilateral means that if I split you in half, I'm going to have essentially mirrored sides. It's going to be symmetrical on both sides. It might not be entirely exact, but overall, they are mirrored sides. Now, let's take a look at bilateral symmetry orientation. So take a look at our human photo here on the right and take a moment to just look over the different planes and vocab words. So dorsal, ventral, anterior, and posterior typically can be used synonymously. It depends on the animal that we're referring to, but overall, whenever you hear them, they are synonymous terms. So dorsal means the top or back. So think like a dorsal fin. That is on the back of a dolphin or a shark. Ventral is the bottom. It's the stomach side. So think like an animal that walks on all fours, that's going to be the belly. So again, these are synonymous, but anterior is going to be the front and posterior is going to be the back. Now for the medial, that is the middle, and anything that goes out from that is going to be lateral, the left and to the right. Proximal means it's closer to the body. So if you have a proximal joint, like your shoulder joint, that's closer to the body. So that's one of our proximal joints. But you can also have a distal joint, which is away from the body. So think about your wrist. Your wrist is a distal joint because it's farther away from your medial body. You can have a superior or inferior. That just means higher or lower. Superior, higher, inferior, lower. Similarly, you can have deep, which is internal, or superficial, which means it's near the surface. So if you have a superficial cut, that just means that it barely scratched the surface. But if you have a deep cut, you're going to want to take a closer look at that and probably head on over to the ER. Now for rostral and caudal. So rostral just means towards the nose. So again, kind of like up, and caudal just means towards the tail. Moving on to bilateral planes for symmetry. So we have our coronal and frontal. So this is just our front and back plane. Our sagittal is our left to right plane, and our mid-sagittal is the exact middle, so our medial. You also have a transverse, which essentially is the upper and lower. It's the cross section. And then our oblique is the angular cross section in between those. Our cavities, we have multiple different body cavities because we are vertebrae. So our dorsal cavity is our top back. So in this cavity, we have our cranial and our vertebral. So this means we have our brain, And we have our vertebrae, which just means our spinal column. Next, we have our ventral, and this means our bottom cavity, like our stomach. And in here, we have our thoracic, pleural, and our pericardial, plus our abdominal, pelvic, which just splits into the abdominal and pelvic. So all of these things means our thoracic is going to be our lungs, and then our pleural and our abdominal and pelvic is just our stomach, and all of our organs lower in the pelvic region. Moving on to tissue. So I hope you already know these vocab terms, but in case you don't, we'll go over them again. Tissue. Tissue, in its simplest form, can be described as a collection of cells carrying out the related functions. Organs are a group of tissues working together to perform certain functions. And an organ system is a set of organs that work together to perform larger, more complex functions like our nervous system, our digestive system, and our circulatory system. So all of these things build on one another. Animal tissues are highly complex, mostly because we're just eukaryotes, we're complex organisms, but more so because we lack cell walls. And because we lack cell walls, we need to have some sort of structure. We're not like plants. We don't have the cell wall that helps us retain the rigidity and the shape. So we need something else to help maintain our structure and ensure everything can function properly without just moving all over our body and having your heart be all the way at your foot or your lungs and your brain. That would be kind of crazy. So our 4 primary tissue types are our epithelial tissues, which covers lines, it protects, and it helps with secretion. So it covers things, it lines things, and it protects things. So this is going to be like our fatty type tissues. Our connective tissue, these are cells that are embedded in the extracellular matrix. So they're loose, they're dense. Cartilage is an example, bone, blood. Muscle tissues, these break into 3 categories: smooth, skeletal, and cardiac. And then finally, we have our nervous tissue, which is for sensory and signaling. And this is where we have our neurons and our glia and our microglia. And again, we're going to look into each of these. Starting with our epithelial tissues, this is the outside of organs, and it helps with structure and the lining of the lumens. And it's classified by shapes and the number of layers. So we can have simple tissue, which just means there's a single layer, or stratified tissue, which means there's multiple layers. And having multiple layers is beneficial to us because then 1, it can regenerate quicker because it has more around it to help protect. And 2, it's better at protection because you can stand to lose a few layers and still be okay. Whereas if you damaged your simple layer, that's all you have. So it's going to be a lot harder to regenerate that, or at least try and continue with your normal functions when you don't have that singular layer. It's very important that we maintain our natural form of homeostasis and equilibrium. So now moving on, we have our squamous, which is categorized as round, flat, small, and it has a central nucleus. And again, this is simple and stratified. So simple would be like our lungs, and it would be like the lining of our lungs, the capillaries, and it helps with gas exchange. And then our stratified is like our skin, our mouth, and this helps with protection. Sure, we can take things in through our skin, but it's mostly for the protective layer on top of our fat, on top of the muscle, on top of the bone. And then we also have our cubital, which is a cube shaped with a singular nucleus, and it's usually simple and found in our glandular tissues and excretory tissue. So this, again, just means that we're moving things in and out of the body. Next, we have our columnar, which is taller than it is wide, and the nucleus is near the base of the cell, and this lines the interior of the digestive and respiratory tracts, and it helps with absorption, secretion, and protection. And then we have our pseudodystratified, where our nuclei is adjoining the columnar cells located at different levels, and it appears as stratified, usually topped with a cilia for movement. And then finally, our goblet cells, and these are like the wine-shaped columnar cells, but they're specialized for excretion, mucus. And fun fact, may or may not be on our test, but the reason that we have mucus is to collect harmful bacteria, anything that's coming into our system, and try and get rid of it. So that's why when you're sick, you tend to produce more mucus, or sometimes even colored mucus, because your body is trying to excrete whatever is harming your body from the inside. Primary tissues are transitional, and this has a stratified layer of cells, and it's found only in the urinary system, and the layers vary because they can become thinner as they're stretched, or they are thicker when they're not stretched. So this is like when you hold on or you go too long without using the restroom, your bladder is going to stretch and thin out. So think of the transitional tissue kind of as like an accordion. So when the accordion is closed, it's really bunched up, it's super thick, but as you pull it apart, that's when it starts to thin out. Connective tissues. Connective tissues are made of a matrix of cells and ground substance. So ground substance is non-living substance that's made of proteins and inorganic material, as well as fibroblasts. These are the primary cell types that make up the fibers of connective tissues. And the fibers of the matrix vary and provide different functions. So collagen, strength and stability. Elastin, stretch and flexibility. And the reticular fibers helps with our support. We have loose slash areolar, and these are used synonymously. So if you hear loose, it means areolar. If you hear areolar, it means loose. They usually have all components of connective tissue in a loose arrangement with a larger matrix. So this is our exterior of blood vessels and organs. It's membranes, and it's typically tough and flexible. Next is our dense or fibrous. Again, they are used synonymously and interchangeably. They have large amounts of collagen and few fibroblasts or matrix material. They're irregular, or they can be regular. The irregular has a randomized arrangement, and it handles stress from multiple different directions. This is our dermis. And the regular has tendon, or makes up our tendons and ligaments, so it's not a randomized arrangement. Cartilage. Cartilage is a large amount of matrix, and it varies in fibrous amounts. So we have chondrocytes, which are cells of cartilage matrix that are found in the lactenae, which is the space within tissue. And it can also be found at the end of bones for cushioning or in place of bones for support. So think of the cartilage between your knees. So that helps with cushion and pressures on your knee joints versus the cartilage in your ear. Our ears and the tips of our nose are actually made of cartilage, and yes, it's for structure, but it also allows for flexibility. Next, we have our adipose. Adipose has no real matrix or fibroblast. It simply stores fat in the form of triglycerides, so it's used for our energy and insulation. Bones. Bones are actually considered tissue. They contain large amounts of collagen and elastin, as well as a large matrix that consists of minerals, like calcium salts. They're strong, hard, but they're also flexible, which is why we consider them tissues. Blood is also considered a tissue because it's made up of a large matrix of several cell types. So our erythrocytes, which are white blood cells, then we have red blood cells, as well as plasma, which is actually a matrix of blood, and various materials inside of all of those. Now for our muscle tissues. Muscle tissues differ by the presence or absence of striations, which are like little bands, and the number of nuclei as well as their location also cause differences, and then voluntary or involuntary controlled functions. So when we think about voluntary versus involuntary, this is like, do you physically have to make this muscle move? So an example of a voluntary would be me raising my arm. I physically have to think about that and then move my arm. That's a voluntary muscle movement. Involuntary means it happens without you really thinking about it. So like your heart beating. I don't have to think about my heart beating, but I also cannot think and make my heart stop beating. It's an involuntary response. But an example of both would be breathing. Breathing is involuntary majority of the time, but you can also take control of it, take deeper breaths, or hold your breath, and that is a voluntary example. Now to get into the different types. We have smooth muscles, which has no striations, a singular central nuclei, and involuntary muscle movement. So these are walls of blood vessels and tubes of our digestive and reproductive systems. Our skeletal muscle has long striated cells with multiple nuclei along the edges, and again, it's voluntary as well, and it's attached to bones for movement. And then our cardiac muscle is shorter with striated cells, a singular nuclei, and involuntary responses. And it's found in the heart and is responsible for the contractions of the heart. And then our intercalculated disc creates a mechanical and electrical connection between cells. And then for our nervous tissue, it contains specialized cells for the transmission and reception of our electrical signals all throughout the body. So when you have a feeling, whether something is hot, whether something is cold, hurts, doesn't hurt, all of those are from our nervous system tissue. So it's made up of 1, neurons, which is the primary cell of nervous tissues. Our glia cells, which are non-neural cells of the nervous tissue, but there's for support and insulation. And then our microglia, which helps with the immune system of the central nervous system. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to ask any questions that you have and keep on studying.